Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Abira, and I am one of your Solid State Circuit Society staff members. Today, we bring to you grant proposal writing tips and strategies, securing funds for your brilliant research idea. Our panelists today are Professor Jane Gu, Professor Dennis Sylvester, and Professor Mohamad Sawan. Today's webinar will be about an hour, and attendees of the webinar have the opportunity to earn a certificate of participation. I will post a link and details on how to obtain the certificate in the chat section of the dashboard. The webinar slides and video will be posted on both the SSCS Resource Center and our Society YouTube channel. If you have any questions for the panelists, please ask questions in the Q&A section of your dashboard. I'd now like to hand it over to Zhenfei Gao and Kameng Li, who will be moderating today's webinar.
All right, thanks, Abira. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Xinfei Guo, assistant professor at the Shanghai Jiao Tong University in China, and also a IEEE SSCS Young Professionals Committee member. So I'll be the moderator for this webinar. Before we kick off the panel discussion, I'd like to start with a short introduction of who we are and what we do. So as young professionals and students, you make up more than 30% of our overall membership, and you are the future of IEEE SSCS. As the SSCS Young Professionals Committee, we strive to address the different needs and interests of our younger member with initiatives like this webinar today. Selected the benefits of SSCS membership for YP members, including the following: access to the SSCS Resource Center, attending distinguished lectures in your local setting, get the opportunities to apply for different grants and awards, develop leadership skills, and make professional connections. And also you have the opportunity to attend the online mentoring platform, which helps you to connect with mentors virtually. And also we have a lot of SSCS YP network event at all SSCS conferences like ISCC, CICC, and so on. So here I'll just cover some initiatives that our committee has been working on. We have the upcoming YP mentoring event as part of the CICC 2022. It will be a hybrid event co-located with CICC. The mentoring event includes panel and breakout sessions where multiple topics will be discussed. It will be open to all SSCS members and also CICC attendees. For details, please go to the CICC website to check more. We have also hosted this webinar series called Webinars for Young Excellence, which is a quarterly webinar series dedicated but not limited to YP members. This webinar series complements the monthly SS technical webinars, which focus on technical developments. So the list of webinars we did in the past is shown here. These webinars are also available at SSCS YouTube channel. We also have the upcoming webinar scheduled. It's going to be on understanding working culture and its importance to succeed, which is going to be presented by 3 distinguished speakers. Please mark your calendar. As part of the webinar series today, we bring you to the panel discussion, grant proposal writing tips and strategies, secure funds for your brilliant research idea. So assume that you just started or going to start your academia career as a junior faculty or a postdoc. You have great research idea in mind, which you think is promising or trailblazing. To start to really implement your idea, you need money for buying equipment, fabricating chips and circuit boards, and also hiring students. So you need to write a strong proposal to get funding from all different sources. Particularly for young researchers, getting the first funding is a key enabler for their continuous research career. Yet writing a grant proposal is time-consuming, stressful, and can be desperate. It's also very different from writing a paper or a project report. You must have questions about what is actually secret behind a successful grant. How can you tailor your application to a specific agency? Should I apply for industrial funding or government funding? And how to deal with rejections, and many, many more. In this panel, we invite three distinguished senior faculty members to discuss the writing tips and strategies of a grant proposal and try to address these questions. Through this webinar, you will learn tips and strategies to maximize your chances of attracting your first funding as an independent researcher. So I'll start with a quick intro about the three distinguished panelists. So the first panelist is Professor Jane Gu from UC Davis. Professor Gu started her academia career at the University of Florida.
Abira, do you want to jump in?
Looks like Zenfei's video and sound cut out. Kameng, can you take over? Kameng, can you take over from here?
Okay, yeah.
Professor Dennis Sylvester,
Oh.
Who is the Edward Davidson Collegiate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Michigan. His main research includes interests in the design of ultra-low microsystems, touching on analog, mixed signal, also at the ISCC, and many more. He's an IEEE fellow. Welcome, Professor Sylvester. The third, but certainly not least panelist is Professor Mohamad Sawan, who is a chair professor at the Westlake University in China, and also an emeritus professor in Polytech, Montreal, Canada. He's a founder and director of the Cutting Edge Net of Biomedical Research and Innovation in Westlake, and of the Polystem Neurotech Lab in Polytech, Montreal. Dr. Sawan published more than 900 peer-reviewed papers. He's a fellow of the IEEE, fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering, and officer of the National Order of Quebec. He received the Queen Elizabeth Golden Jubilee Medal, the Zhejiang Westlake Friendship Award. Welcome, Dr. Sawan. So firstly, I want to say thank you to all three distinguished panelists for spending time. To begin with, so each of these panelists will start with their statements on their perspectives about grant proposing, grant proposal writing, and then the second part of the webinar will be moderated Q&A by me, and the final part will be audience Q&A moderated by Professor Carmen Lei from University of Macau. I think all of us are eager to hear the opinions from the panelists. So let's start with the first part of the panel now. So Dennis, what's your review on grant proposal writing? So let me go to your slides. So you can start, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you very much for the intro, Shinfei, and thanks for attending. So yeah, I just have two slides because we only have 5 minutes, but they're fairly dense text slides. So the first point I want to make is, unfortunately, the reality of proposals is not quite the same as what you might expect. Sort of an ideal notion or the concept of proposing work kind of it indicates that you have an idea, you're not really sure if it's going to work, you write about it a little bit, and then you get money to decide whether it's going to work and write the paper. But at least in my experience, the reality is a little bit more that you really are working on an idea until it's largely proven before you can get funding for that. So, what happens is it's a little bit of a shell game where you're basically using potentially previously funded proposal money to work on the next idea. So it's time borrowing basically, and you're developing an idea to the point where you're pretty confident in it and you can defend it in a proposal against reviewers who are going to be poking holes in it, right? So if you come out with a half-baked but potentially really interesting idea, the reviewers tend to shy away from that, unfortunately, um, because they don't want to take that risk, perhaps, or they see other work that is submitted in the same call that is much more airtight, much more far along in the process. There's detailed simulation results. It's pretty clear it's going to work, et cetera, et cetera. So unfortunately, that's a little bit how it often works. What this means is that, once the pipeline's going, this model works really well. When you're in steady state, you can kind of use this model where you're using the previous money to get the next money and then that money to get the next money and so on. If you're young and junior faculty or just starting out, of course, you have this startup problem. It's just like an analog circuit, a reference. You have to kickstart it somehow and have a startup circuit or a startup methodology. So the bottom portion of this slide kind of talks about some of the ways to do that. Um, so obviously, when you're just starting, if some of you are not yet in a faculty position and you're interviewing, for instance, this year or next year for faculty positions, you're in a position to where you can negotiate your startup package, right? And the startup package is your seed funding. So that acts as the funding for your ideas before you can have them fleshed out enough to get more funding. So really that becomes the first stage of your pipeline, if you want to think about it that way. If it's too late for you to do this, say you're in your first or second or third year of your academic position already, there are often seed type funding options available within universities. So there's internal monies that's often available. It's not going to be a lot of money. It won't be a lot of money, but it will be perhaps enough to pay half of a student for half of a year and let them work on an idea to the point where then you have a really well founded proposal. Another couple points at the bottom here are that, as a junior faculty, have frequent discussions with your colleagues so they know what you're working on. This can lead them to basically saying, let's say it's a senior faculty, they may roll you into their next larger scale proposal. Or they may say, well, I've got some work I'm doing now and I don't have the bandwidth and maybe we can work together and then I'll support half your student and things like that, right? So there may be ways for you to leverage the established faculty in your departments to do this. I just did this with a junior faculty in my department where I was writing a large center proposal, and he's very new, but I knew him and I knew he was doing some relevant work. So I said, come on in and let's work on this together. So this happens all the time, and hopefully your colleagues are collegial enough to do this. And then the last one is the industry connections. If during your PhD studies, if you were working with industry at all through your advisor, if you have any connections there, this can be a faster startup process than going through the National Science Foundation or other processes that have very long lead times on getting funding, reviewing proposals and things like that. Again, not going to be as large amount of money, but you can often get a gift with relatively low effort that you can use to support a student for a year to really ramp up for the full federal funded type of proposals that are going to be larger dollar amounts. So those are some ways to overcome that startup problem. So go to the next slide. I probably just have a minute or two here. So of course, as was mentioned in the introduction or overview, you're going to have a lot of rejections. The hit rates on things like National Science Foundation proposals are really low, like single digit %, as low as any competitive conference in any field, much lower than ISSCC, more like some of the AI conferences that get 10,000 submissions these days. So this is something where you need to diversify. You need to look at other funding agencies. NSF is in the United States is the big first thing you think about for career proposals and things like that, but you should be thinking about all the different DoD agencies. The Semiconductor Research Corporation, or SRC, has often or traditionally been open to funding junior faculty and bringing them into the fold. That's something that you should really work on. Again, not super high hit rates, but if you know the program manager or can talk to them, I think it helps a lot. And then the industry gift example I mentioned is another route to getting maybe potentially a higher ROI in terms of the yield that might be a little bit higher for the work that you do. And then two other minor points I'll just mention real quickly. Maybe the questions and answers at the end, we'll get to some of this. But, you know, think about our return on investment when deciding what to go for. If you are writing certain type of proposal and it's a very specialized format and it's got a 30-page format of technical material, that's a lot of work. And if the hit rate is going to be very low, your effort might be spent more on the top of this slide where you're talking to your industry contacts and saying, hey, can I get a $40,000 gift in this area of work? It would really seed my work, and I'll send a student to you for an internship. And there's different ways of getting benefit from the company for that. So there may be a better return on investment there. So think about that. And then the budget allocation I was asked to mention in passing. You know, I'm not going to talk much about that, but you know, the funding agencies like federal government are typically wanting to see that be predominantly student support. They don't want to see a lot of extra stuff. They don't want to, you know, you definitely should have some support for your own salary in there, summer salary in particular, especially for junior faculty. But for the most part, it should be predominantly student support. There, you know, if you want to buy more equipment and things like that, ideally that's part of your startup package. If you don't have enough there are infrastructure type of grants typically that you can go for that have higher hit rates that might allow you to get some of those. Or you can go to companies and ask for donations, and sometimes that's effective as well. So I'll stop there and let the other speakers.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dennis. Yeah, that's really insightful. So now let's switch to Professor Mohamad Sawan. What's your view on this topic?
So this is, I am, as was introduced here in Hangzhou in Westlake University. Could you go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So not to repeat what Dennis said, of course, everything starts with bright idea. You are junior faculty, just finish PhD or postdoc, same, then highly motivated. You have, of course, to take time to know what are the rules, what are the really the guideline, instruction. Very, very important to really match what is really asked for on those agency and all related rules and scope, of course. Then it depends. I assume for junior you have kind of individual means research for funding. So, for example, in Canada, we have this discovery grant is individual. We talk about programs there, not about projects. So, of course, you finish again, you start your position, not good time to have completely new idea. You have really to connect somehow with your knowledge, your skills. And of course, focus on this to bring money and as Dennis said, to have enough, maybe little money as individual budget to support one student maybe, and to show after a couple of years you are a rising star, I can say, and then you can apply to renew with more money and with different, bigger budget of funding, different program, etc. So starting the application, if it is the first one, of course, or renewal, it means you have already some experience. It is not the same. So with this means you have really to I don't know, start somewhere with. Again, as we said, is not really a publication, but is there are parameter inside. There are again section have to fit, and I am elaborating this on next page. Next page, please.
Sure.
So applying is easy, but maximizing to have the successful outcome is different. So we have, of course, to satisfy reviewer. Reviewer, as you know, is the technical side of your idea. Committee is more elaborated, means we have to talk about target area. Even the reviewer say yes, yes, yes. Maybe the committee have more parameter and can say maybe or no. So this is why you have really to deal with this list here. So you have, of course, to show you are you know the state of the art in your field related to this idea. And of course, you have to demonstrate this with, of course, needed sections. Then you go to elaborate your idea, means what hypotheses you have, what is really your long-term goals, and of course, specific and the short-term objective comes first. Do you have any preliminary results so far? You should have, because again, I just mentioned not really to come completely fresh from nowhere. So you have to show you know where you go and you have already did some work related. And then everything you want to do, you have to propose a methodology to do it. Means have to be clear. You assume you will use this material later to do your project somehow. And then you have also to think about plan B. Plan B is known for engineering. As you know, if it doesn't work, you have really to show to the committee you have other idea, not only one fixed idea. Then what is really the impact of this? It depends. Of course, I assume you are not working with industry, not with local. This is for the best, of course, funding, government like NSF. Everywhere we have kind of NSF. In Canada is NSERC. Here in China now we talk about NSFC with China. So what is the impact for this, of course, agency, for this, the country, and so on. And then, of course, I just mentioned about rules. If they give you a 3-page to fill, don't come with 3 point something or don't come with 2.5. You have really to make sure you fill with great material those 3-page allowed or assigned for this grant application. So if the team, I think young, not really team grant, but again will come quickly. So again, if you collaborate with anyone, you have really to show there are already some bridge and collaboration is clear who does what, why we need to be more than one, etc., etc. So those details, of course, must be very clear to maximize the application. Also, as I just mentioned, it depends again if you are at the city, because you have city like here, Shanghai is almost bigger like Canada, you know. So city may be very easy to have found. Province a little bit more difficult, but still doable. But the country is NSF is more science, more maybe competition is higher and then more difficult. You have really to read more the rules and guideline to apply. And then I cite here a couple of places, of course. So I am familiar now with Canada, spent very many dozen of years there and new in China, but already I got several found here in China. I consider myself lucky. And then have to, again, to be able to have this complementarity between different of course, agency or program or project, and don't do the error to overlap. If you have two ideas, must be completely separated, but have can be linked, of course, but not to overlap when you apply anywhere else. So I think this is my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mohamad. That's very insightful. So let me now go to Jane's slides. So Jane, can you please provide your views on this topic?
Sure. Thanks, Xinfei. So I would like to share my personal tip for funding application, which I hope that it can bring some valuable information to you. So this is my general proposal preparation flow. Start from idea, hopefully, preferably actually, the idea is based on prior work or we already have some pre-investigation so that it's more sound and solid. And I will try to talk with people, particularly program managers, to get feedback, to refine ideas. Once the idea is roughly there, then I will begin the proposal writing stage. And certainly during the stage, if there are opportunities to talk with program manager, then that's great. That's better to even improve. And until the proposal is ready or the due date is there, so submit it. That's the whole process I typically go through. Next. I always believe idea is the key for proposals. So I basically follow Helmet questions here to frame my idea to develop the proposal. So basically what I'm doing, what I'm trying to accomplish, right? What's done today, what they are limitations, what's your new idea approach, and if successful, what difference it will make, who will care, right? What's the impacts? And how long it will take, how much cost it will need, and what are the deliverables, as well as how to measure the progress. Next.
Yeah.
So this lists major funding resources in US. Majority are government agency. The last one, SRC, are majorly from industry funding. Next. So more funding resources here, certainly as Dennis mentioned, industry money. Also national labs, they also have fundings to support academia research. Besides large companies, actually can also work with small companies, particularly startup companies, to apply some agency funding, for example, SBIR, STTR programs. And besides, the Industry and National Lab Foundation is also a good resource to looking for funding. Depends on different fields, you should have different funding foundations to support your research. Particularly for young investigators, I really encourage you to go for those programs. For example, NSF Career, DARPA Young Faculty Award, or ARO. All this has a dedicated program to just support young investigators. For example, they have limitations. What's the maximum time that you are in academia? Or they have limited, let's say, assistant faculty level. So this is definitely the one you should try if you are young, if you are qualified. Next. Besides, always try to get help from other resources. For example, your institute research office. My school, UC Davis, will always send out email reminding list of the outside research funding resources. So you just need to sign up for the email list. Then you will get those information, which is very helpful. And certainly your colleagues is very good resources, and especially in the similar field of yours, as well as collaborators. It's very, so I highly recommend you to take part into center proposal if there are chances, because in there you will get know different field person, and then you will see a lot of opportunities that beyond your own field. So you can have a lot of collaboration opportunities. Next. Okay, so final words. I do believe idea is the key, and also talking with people is important, and try to get help as much as possible to different resources. And as Dennis mentioned, funding application is challenging and also highly demanding. However, the success rate is not very high, especially the government agency funding, and even great proposal can be rejected. So to me, to better cope with rejection, so I always try to get prepared to get rejected emotionally in the first place. And besides money, I always try to get something else from funding application process. For example, learn something new, get to know someone, which will be the rewarding and will be the motivation that I keep trying to writing proposal besides money. So final takeaway message, keep trying, and I believe you will definitely get funded.
All right. Thanks, Jing. That was a very encouraging statement. So thanks all three panelists for sharing your individual opinions. So now let's roll to the moderated Q&A session. So you all mentioned about seeking funding from either companies or government, but like in your views, what are the essential differences between a project proposal for the government versus for the company, and also what are the writing tips for each? Maybe Dennis, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, the typically for a company, it's a lot more informal, right?
Right.
You know, it's you're dealing with someone, they often don't even have any strict requirements on like a proposal format. Sometimes they do. Meta or Facebook, has like a 1 or 2 pager they want you to write. And then, then you write that up real quick and then they'll give you 50 or 60K or something like that, right? Whereas with, consortiums like SRC, which is really company funding, but that's more formal. But even those are 5-page, even in the full proposal. That's a nice system because it's a 1-page white paper, they filter, and then they do a 5-page full proposal. So it's really pretty brief. As soon as you get into federal funding, you're dealing with 15 or longer pages, dense. You have to write a lot about the education side, obviously, things like that in many cases. So just a lot more writing and a lot more bureaucracy and formalism in the government funding. So, but like I said in my 5-minute spiel, the dollar amounts you're going to get from companies tend to be smaller. So, when you're writing it up for a company, they just kind of want a really succinct description. They don't need to have, you don't have to go through a lot of the details on prior art. You don't have a couple of pages of that anymore, things like that. So it's a lot quicker and cleaner and faster turnaround time. So it's actually a really good thing, but you need to have some context typically largely to have a good chance at that. But a lot of times these managers can write checks for up to 50K pretty easily without too much oversight. So it can actually be a pretty good thing for that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's very helpful suggestions. Mohamad, anything to follow up on that?
I think not really much to add, but in general, of course, industry, if you have the green light, maybe it depends on the industry also, but in general, if you have the green light, success rate is 100%. But with science or research based funding is maybe between 5 and 15 or 20%. So, and also everything goes with the same number means application with NSF is a big pile of course, document. Application with industry, it can be a couple of pages, so it depends. But not easy to compare. The money is different. Also, if you don't have this grant from academic side, NSF side or equivalent, you cannot really, you don't have visibility, you cannot apply for bigger grant later, etc., etc. So you have really, if you have industry, is not sufficient, but it's good to start.
I see. Yeah, it's kind of accumulated. You need to get first one and then
Sure.
get on. Yeah, I see. Yeah, Jane, anything you want to add?
So I completely agree what Denise said. I think because we are both in US, so we know the system, how it works. Probably I just provide some details. For example, the industry funding, they also have basically 2 types. What Denise mentioned is, I believe is majorly the gift type. So that's the best money you want to get. It's very flexible and it has almost no overhead. And also, as Denise said, they almost no much writing and probably 1 page should be enough. And there's a second type condition that company, they probably know exactly what they want from you. And they are more like procurement. So they want to get the stuff from you, and they will ask details, provide the state of work, SOW. So you basically follow the SOW, and based on the cost of each item to charge the company. So that's a second type. But for that, you do need to pay overhead. So that's the type,
I see.
two types. And for government funding, it's also there are two types government funding. So there's one like more general. So there's no specific objectives. You propose ideas as long as the idea is innovative and is sound, it will have high chance to get funded. For example, NSF, majority of the program fall into this category. But for some program, for example, the DAPA program, the program itself has very specific objectives. So you have to respond to their call for proposal. So that's the different type. And in terms of writing, I think for DAPA proposal, quite often they will have very specific writing requirement. They will define how many sections to include, which section talk about what. So very specific. You follow their instruction. So that's one type. But for NSF, it's more open. It's up to you how PI want to present your proposal. But they have some basic elements to include, to require. For example, they have to ask you to add a specific intellectual merit, the broad impacts. So yeah, so that's some details to add on top of Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the detailed answers. So yeah, I guess a somewhat relevant question is that so what if like for like young faculty member, they want to pursue a brand new idea, and then they need to write a proposal for this idea, but unfortunately they don't have any like previous either publications or research experiences in this area. So for this case, how should we like convince the reviewers in the proposal? So maybe this time, Mohamad, you want to start?
Okay, so yeah, as I just mentioned, actually, in my 5 minute means junior faculty doesn't have large background, of course, to show, but grant application is not only the idea, is many, of course, other maybe parameter around, and most maybe agency balance between the candidate himself or herself means percentage, maybe the CV, not 50%, maybe 30% or something like that. Then you have, of course, the material, the grant, the idea, and to convince, of course, the reviewer or the committee, you have something new, and then means also you respect what they ask for about the rules. I just mentioned this again, and then usually for the junior is the committee or mainly the committee are more tolerant. Means you have you don't have big money, but you have some good chance if you make or you build, you write a good grant application, you know. For example, again, if I refer to discovery grant in Canada, acceptance rate is very, very high comparing to strategic or big grant application. Very high means maybe more than 40 or 50%, but money is not big enough only to to one student, something like that. Then with this, of course, you can succeed the first and motivating to go to next and have big money, of course, as I just mentioned. So you have really to work hard to prepare a first grant application. Is not easy. It's not really publication, as was said, and but the chances are enough big to succeed. So this is what I can say here.
Yeah, that's very useful information. Yeah, thanks. So Dennis, anything to add?
No, I mean, that's a great comment. I mean, starting with the
Okay.
smaller, lower risk ones, they're going to be more willing to take chances with newer people. It is a big challenge because
Right.
one of the aspects that they're evaluating on the work on is this person capable of doing this work? And if if you're
Right.
don't have a track record of doing super high frequency characterization, and there's a lot of work in that, you have to have the infrastructure, you have to have the experience how to do that. For picking one example, they may not be confident that you're going to be able to take these dollars and put them to good use, right? So it's definitely a challenge there. So you can start with the smaller seed type stuff, like Mohamad said. You could partner up, right? So if you partner up with someone who, maybe they're more senior and maybe they don't need the money as much, so you might be able to
Right.
get a bigger chunk, even though you're both co-PIs. You're getting 75% of the money, and then the person's giving some credibility to the grant. So that's another option. So yeah, those are some
I
ideas.
see. Yeah, thanks. So Jane, anything you want to add on this topic?
I think it depends on the idea. If the idea itself, if the expertise fall into your experience, right, the required expertise, then I think it's okay. You can talk with program manager your idea, although you do not have prior work, but you have all the necessary expertise. So that's justifiable as long as you are passionate. And then the program manager, if they are serious considered, they will give you feedback. They may ask you to do some preliminary investigations, etc. So that's very helpful. The interaction with program manager that you want to apply. If the idea is not falling to your expertise, for example, if we are in analog, I've mixed signal background, but we have idea of digital signal processing, then that's different story. It's hard. Or you can try to get a collaborator for this idea if you are really passionate about it.
Yeah, I think as all of you mentioned, I think collaboration is really a good idea. If you want to try out like a new field, try to collaborate with someone who is expertise in that field, and then slowly get into that field. Yeah,
Right.
thanks. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, a follow-up question is that so I'm sure all three of you have been at different review panels. Like from reviewers' perspective, right? So what do you like if you get a proposal? So what do you expect to see? First, or what's your really what are things really like struck you? Is it like novelty or detailed implementation or previous research experience? Or all of them? So is there like a percentage roughly in terms of those aspects? So maybe this time, Dennis, can you start?
Sure. I guess you listed three things, I think.
Yeah, yes.
Novelty, detailed implementation, or previous research foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I put less emphasis on the latter one, actually, even though it's a little counter to what we just talked about. If your idea is
Yeah.
good and you've thoroughly sort of analyzed it, at least at a preliminary level, I would give more credence to that. I think the novelty is the big thing, obviously, and also, the understanding of the prior work, right? So if there's prior art and you're not talking about it and you're claiming novelty, obviously, as with the paper, that's going to be a big detraction. So understanding what's been done in the field, and understanding sort of the lay of the land in the field. So having a sort of a good perspective on the potential impact, the applications, different things like that. So looking at that, as well as analyzing the main technical contribution to the point that I believe it might work. I don't need to see that it definitely works, but many reviewers do, right? So many, like as I mentioned in my 5-minute, people have a different bar. And so if you have a really kernel of an idea and you just throw it out there, people will just pick at it. And that's not usually going to sell too well, unfortunately, even though it should really, if it's a cool idea, but it doesn't tend to work that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So Mohamad, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think grant application for me is like a big PhD proposal, means you have to have hypothesis, you have to have, of course, goal, objective. All these are very, very important for a project to ask for support. Also, again, the experience because you are a young faculty, junior faculty means you have already the credibility to lead, of course, research. And then, of course, you have to show this expertise on the grant application. Then, again, two parts mainly are important for me as reviewer. If the candidate have enough experience to lead this, have already shown some result, he's able to do this or not. And then how he proposed to what is the methodology, how he will really make this happen.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So Jane, anything to add on this?
Actually, my view is that we need to have everything actually, because in frank speaking, especially for high competitive proposal, right? You have to have all the elements, novelty, preliminary results, experience, etc. My view is that the PI should try your best to make every section strong so that it's hard to pick, critical holes from your proposal. It's very picky that if PI do not pay attention, and although the proposal itself is very strong, but just one or two loose point which pick up by a reviewer, then it can sink the proposal. So my view is opposite. So we have to make strong of all these elements. Try to do not leave loose points there.
Yeah, that's
I don't
very
want
fair.
to priority. That's my view.
Right. Yeah, I think it makes sense because it's already very competitive, especially in grant proposal. If you mess up something, then for sure there's much lower chance, even more. Yeah. Yeah, thanks all for your insightful tips. So now maybe let me ask a question for Mohamad. Since you have worked in actually several countries and also continents, so what do you see about international collaboration in terms of writing proposals? Do reviewers actually value that, or in general, what are the tips for writing a proposal for like a collaborative work?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, I think the degree of complexity of a grant application on this context means collaboration between means researchers from different country is much more, I think, how to say, much more risky or much more important to make good, I think, document or good demonstration that, for example, this is to collaborate. Do we have already some collaboration, or only we put together to apply for the grant? This is have to be clear. We have already some collaboration. Have to clarify why this collaboration means the link, complementarity, who does what exactly to make the whole happening and working. So, of course, different maybe even we do science in both country or both corner means still have some different culture, means, for example,
Right.
in Far East, the way we convince committee is little different than North America. So we have really to have also to the right collaborator. It means quickly doesn't work. We have really to make sure work with colleague for long-term collaboration, not really reset or new.
Right. Right.
And so maybe in short, in summary, much work needed to succeed those, because also the money is very little in general. So country don't put a lot of money for those collaboration. Even the number of also of application is not big, but still the success rate is not high.
Right.
And all parameter for a serious grant application apply twice, because it depends on the program. Some program we apply, for example, in 2 different country, and the committee have to talk, or we build one big application and we share on two countries. So experience on both is different, But in general, for a young, maybe junior faculty, not good to start with
Right.
such big,
Yeah.
I think, grant application in my sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very, very helpful. So yeah, let me now switch gear a little bit and ask a question to Jing and Dennis. I think Dennis kind of mentioned this a little bit in his statement. So when writing proposal, we are usually asked to plan for the budget, right? So what like how important is that, and also what are guidelines for that? Jing, do you want to start?
Yeah. So for budget, actually I spend much less time on budget than proposal.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's quite straightforward.
Mhm.
As long as you have a good budget, staff. So they
Right.
will actually provide you the template.
I see.
As Denise mentioned, in US, majority of the fund from government agency normally support student tuition, student stipend, etc. Right? But it depends on different research. You may need other resources. For example, for IC, we may need fabrication. We may need clean room access. We may need software. We may need materials to build experiment research. I mean, to do the testing. And in some low, I mean, not very high cases, some low cases that you may be able to request equipment money, but this is not very often for NSF money, because NSF, it's the money size is not big. But for other agencies, if needed, they may also allow you to use the money to purchase equipment, which is also very good.
I see. Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Dennis, anything to add besides that?
No, I mean, in the budget, if it's federal funded, they basically tell you what the limit is, and almost everybody just picks the limit, right? So, and then they can cut it from there, right? It's a little bit less obvious when you're dealing with maybe SRC funding. They don't tell you the limit. There's sort of a de facto limit, which is, maybe 1 student per PI, or with some extras in there. So that's a little bit less clear. With industry funding too, you don't know how much to ask for, necessarily. They just usually will dictate a gift of like 50K or something. So the federal funding, though, the big ones that they basically allocate, this is a $1 million max or a 500K max, or certainly with the young investigators, they're very well defined in terms of the dollar amount. And then within that, then, as I said before, it's mostly student. For our field, obviously there are things like chips, right? So if you want to fund we haven't talked about that, but if you want to fund silicon runs, that can eat up a lot, right? So if you want to do an advanced technology node, you know, very expensive per square millimeter. So putting that in can start to eat up a lot of your budget, unfortunately. So it's something that, you know, it's known, it has to be there, right? So it's sort of like it can be a negative, right? So if I put in my budget, I mean, some reviewers don't go to this level of detail, but sometimes they do. They say, well, you've pitched all these things, and you need to build prototypes to prove these ideas out, but you don't have anything in your budget to demonstrate, you know, the in silicon. There's no chip fab, there's no packaging costs, board costs, equipment, anything like that. That can be a negative for you, right? That can be perceived as, hey, you don't really know what you're doing. How are you going to do this? If you have some other avenue to support that, you write that in your resources. You know, I have access to this technology for no cost, or I have, you know, equipment. This is the equipment I have. I don't need anything else to measure it, stuff like that. So that's important.
Got it. Yeah, that's very insightful. So yeah, due to time limit, so now we need to conclude this moderate Q&A session, and now we are going to do our audience Q&A session. So as a reminder for our audience, please use the Q&A section of your dashboard to ask any questions you have regarding the discussion we had today. So now I will switch to Professor Carmen Lei, who gonna moderate this section. Carmen, floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, Xinfei. This is Carmen Lei. So we have quite a lot of questions from our audience. So the first question is, if we write a proposal for a company or like for industry, so actually do we have to give something in return, or other way to ask this question, what should we be aware of? For example, like the intellectual properties. Maybe Dennis, do you want to start first?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Which question in the Q&A are you pointing to again? Sorry.
For the audience Q&A. So if we write a proposal for a company.
Oh, okay. Do you have to get something in return? Yeah. So
yeah, or what should we be aware of when we are doing a proposal, getting fund from the industry?
Yeah, I think Jane kind of alluded to this a little bit when she talked about gift funding versus other sources of funding, right? So that from a company, you can either get gift funding in which there's absolutely no strings attached. They cannot dictate anything. They have to write a letter basically to the university saying, here's a check. I'm going to support, you know, Jane Gu's research in this topic generally. Thank you very much, you know. And then maybe on the side, you have discussions with the employees and say, hey, you know, we'll have a call every month and we'll update you and so on and so forth. There's also contracts. Contracts are different. That's what SRC runs under. Contracts, there are deliverables. So, you know, you have to have deliverables. You might just be in the form of reports and papers. It might be in the form of code or design, things like that. So there's definitely a lot more involved there in a contract setting. But most companies, if you're working in a one-on-one setting, not most, but many do work on a gift mode, but sometimes they work on contracts. And it needs to be very carefully vetted by the university legal people. You cannot do this, right? So faculty have no power to sign anything. So it always has to run through legal, and legal gets, you know, at different universities is very tricky to work with, because they will say, you know, this clause of the contract constitutes a limit on your ability to publish. Universities won't tolerate that. We have to be able to publish everything that we do, basically. And so there's sometimes a lot of back and forth in terms of negotiations there. So it's all dealt with up front. You know, if it's a contract, as to what is delivered or what is deliverable. So it's very much a case by case basis there.
Okay. Thank you. And then next questions. So should we contact the program officer to have a soft pitch and probe their interest in the idea? Maybe Mohamad, you work in different countries. Where you have what's your idea in these questions?
Yeah, actually, in every, of course, I can say agency, you have many program, and for every program, usually agency assign people to help to answer question, you know. So usually you have good service to have feedback if you have any concern about any maybe form or criteria or something like that is available. But I can mention here maybe something very important is usually when you apply first time, you have in every institution, every university, every research center should have some people, some expert to really to look to your material or to answer your question, but also look to your material before you click, you submit, to really to make sure you respect state of the art of even applying, you know. And then if not, it's not good for the institution usually, because the committee can ask, wow, where does this come from? And then and then of course, but there are service, no problem. General, of course, if you have a more deep scientific, you know, critical, no one will answer for, of course, but to help you to make that means the application on time, good quality. Usually people answer without delay.
Okay, thank you. So maybe one more questions. So when we are writing for the proposals, to whom should we write to? So should we write it to a knowledgeable expert of the science or technology in a specific area, or to a broader group of the audience? So maybe this one, Jane, what's your view on this?
Sure. So this depends where you submit your proposal. For example, if you submit your proposal to DARPA, definitely you are talking with an expert with experts in the field. So you need to write your proposal in very detail in terms of your idea, the preliminary results, the supporting materials, etc. So you are talking, the review panels, they are experts in the field. But if you submit a proposal to NSF, they're also experts. However, for NSF, the way they assemble panel is different from DARPA. So they will assemble experts from, although it's related field, but not exactly in your fields. Okay, so that means those experts, they understand in the general umbrella, but may not, at least not everyone, understand very detail in your idea or in your proposed approach. But they may have one or two who are experts in your field. So that means in order to cover, you know, the panelists' different background, so you need to structure your proposal differently in SF.
Okay, I see. So it's more important to know who will be our audience, or what type of funding agency we are going to submit. So maybe one more question. So how important is the economical impact of your project or the proposal when we are preparing it? So maybe Dennis, what's your opinion about the economical impact?
Sorry, I was typing a response to Noble's question in the Q&A, so I thought it was a very good question. So you're asking about the financial impact? I don't see that question in the Q&A.
Yeah, the economical impact sessions in the application project.
I guess I don't really understand the question, so I'm looking for
So
the.
how important is the economical impact when we are preparing the proposal?
It's not.
Translation.
I mean, not very important, to be honest. I mean, it depends on the agency, but if you're focusing on DoD, they want to know how it's going to translate to use in the Department of Defense, right? They don't care about consumer, marketing of this thing. If you're talking about to a company, they're looking at you as longer term research typically, that you shouldn't be doing near term development for them. So again, it shouldn't matter too much. So definitely when you're, when you're writing big center grants, you have to think about all of these things. They want to know, is this a huge potential impact on society in different ways, both the good of society and also economic impact. And you'll have to write about all those things. But if you're talking about a single PI grant, whether it's for a company or for NSF, usually, you want to talk about societal impact a little bit more, like I'm working on biomedical research. These things can go into implantables or go into hearables or go into whatever to help people live better lives. The fact that, okay, maybe Apple will monetize it eventually and make billions of dollars, usually they don't care as much about, but it's nice to have, but it's not always a must have.
Okay. Mohamad, do you have any thing to add on this topic?
Yes, maybe yes. Okay. So, of course, everyone knows what's happening in China. And China, of course, encourage this translation. Means you do research is fine, but have really to protect and not only publish and run the economy. This is very important. So in Canada also, my experience was, but a little bit less, honestly speaking. So usually also as scientists, academic side, we are happy when we do the research, not for when starting, but for my age, when we spend your life, you want really to see your effort research can go to be beneficial for the country in terms of economy. Yes, it's important economy. Now, again, for junior faculty, when you start, you have to pay attention, because if you work much with industry want you to do development, you cannot publish, you cannot have a promotion, you cannot have, etc., tenure, etc., etc. So you can make money maybe, but you cannot really succeed your academic side. Then you have to focus first, in my opinion, on really research science to innovate, have something completely new, and then later you can work with industry, with anyone else, with the economy to prosper more.
Okay, and Jane, what's your opinion, or do you have anything to add here?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, I'm reading the question here.
Yeah, what's the economical impact? How important is the economical impact in the application?
Yeah, right. So as Denise mentioned, if it's a DoD project, right, proposal, they already have very specific requirement, most likely. So if you can meet their requirement, you are already hero. So it doesn't matter the economic. For NSF proposal, what you need to highlight is broad impacts. Whether the broad impacts is economic or is human health, is environment, etc. As long as your broad impacts is there, then that's fine. It's not necessary to be economical impact.
Okay, thank you. So, Sylvester, I will pass this back to you.
Thanks, Carmen, and thanks our audience for asking excellent questions. So due to time limit, we need to conclude the Q&A session here. And the final note is that the proposal writing is very important, and hopefully today all three distinguished speakers provide you some insights and perspectives on this very important topic. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I would really like to appreciate Jane, Dennis, and Mohamad for spending time. Your suggestions and opinions will inspire and guide the audience about their own academia journey. So as noted earlier, the recording of this webinar will be available at the SSCS YouTube channel. Before you leave, don't forget to complete our feedback survey. Thank you and have a great day. Bye. Thanks.
Coming.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.